The CFAI recently announced the changes that they're making to the curriculum for 2023, and some of these items are pretty surprising. I think you're going to agree with me. And look, they changed the curriculum, it seems like at least a little bit every single year. But the curriculum for 2023 has a lot of new additions on some odd topics and some changes to certain topics that very much needed it. I'll be excited to see the actual differences between the old chapters and the new. Kicking it right off with a head scratcher, to the level 1 CFA exam, we are adding an introduction to geopolitics to the curriculum. Yeah, you heard that right. They're now going to have an LOS or two about Russia invading Ukraine or other similar matters that can affect financial markets, I suppose. As you can probably tell, I'm really surprised to see this being added. Sure, it could be interesting information and it certainly can impact financial markets, but it just seems very different from the rigorous accounting principles that have been taught by the CFA Institute throughout the years. Sticking with changes to the level 1 exam curriculum, next up is another section being added called Corporate Structures and Ownership. The actual content for an LOS with a title like this, I think could look many different ways. It could be all about accounting principles for different ownership structures. It may have to do with shareholders' equity calculations with different business entities. I really don't know. It could be a pretty interesting and potentially valuable new LOS. Next, looks like what, in my opinion, may be a great addition to what many of us have studied in probably the equity sections on the CFA program, and that is called Business Models and Risks in Drivers in Financial Modeling. I think this is very much needed. If you follow finance Twitter, you've probably seen a handful of people make fun of the CFA program when looking at what Tesla stock, for example, has done for the past 3 years. I think the CFA Institute is well aware that there are variables that can affect the effectiveness or the relative multiples being applied in financial modeling to different companies. I'm glad we're going to get a type of formal education from the Institute about how these risks and how these valuations can be adjusted for the current reality. Moving on to just changed level 1 topics. These are no longer new topics to the level 1 curriculum. We have some changes coming to the Introduction to Corporate Governance section. I don't know that I felt like some changes were needed or even warranted here, but they could be good things. We'll have to see exactly what the Institute publishes next year. The next area that's changing is one that I have asked to be changed throughout all of my years as a candidate, and I have talked about on this channel as the single most difficult topic throughout the entire CFA program. And that would be derivative markets and instruments, pricing and valuation. Now keep in mind, we're still talking about the level 1 exam curriculum changes, and there's going to be a really big point on this same area for level 2, so stay tuned for that. But boy oh boy, if you're someone who may study for the level 1 exam in the future, you should be extremely excited that the Institute is hopefully giving a total overhaul to the derivative section. It's always been a notoriously difficult to read, difficult to learn, and poorly worded educational piece on derivative instruments and pricing and valuation. I know Mark Meldrum has complained about it, and I think in many of his video lessons on derivatives, he complains about how bad the CFA Institute's curriculum is at teaching candidates on it. And like I said, you've heard me be like, oh man, derivatives calculations are one of the most difficult things I've ever had to work through in my life, which I still believe to be true. Here's hoping the Institute revamps just about everything that they present to candidates in the derivatives section and makes it a much more enjoyable, effective, and less painful learning experience. Then finally, we have some changes coming to fintech and investment management, and to be honest, that was not an LOS when I was a level 1 candidate. I don't know what specifically is tested or taught in that area, and I don't know what changes they could be applying, but if you're someone who's had it in the past and wish they would have made some changes to it, here you go. Now on to level 2. Similarly, we have some totally new sections being added, but also some changes coming to existing LOSs, and stay tuned for the point here on the derivatives section for the level 2 exam. But first, a new topic getting added is cost of capital advanced topics. Now maybe I'm undereducated on the topic of cost of capital, but I don't know how much more advanced you can get than just figuring out what the cost of capital for a business unit or an enterprise as a whole should be, right? Once you know how to calculate the WACC, it's like you can get done what you need to do with that cost of capital information that you now have. So how much more advanced can that get? We'll have to find out. That's the only new topic for the level 2 curriculum, so now on to some changes. They listed multiple regression here, which I'm surprised by. I thought the level 2 quant section, specifically the LOS on multiple regression, was one of the best pieces of educational information I've ever read through and learned from. It worked really well for me in teaching me to understand this concept. So I'm a little bit sad maybe that they're changing this. I don't think they need to fix that area, but maybe some of you have a different opinion. Next is a change in economic growth calculations, and then they say they're changing their financial statement modeling curriculum. Also surprised by that. In my opinion, financial statement modeling only really goes in one way. You got your 4 financial statements, they basically all include the same variables, and you plug the variables in. So what the Institute felt they needed to change about their presentation in the curriculum about financial statement modeling, I'm not sure. This is another area where I feel like a change may not have been needed, but again, I could be missing something that everyone hated about financial statement modeling in the previous level 2 curriculum, so we'll see. The next 2 don't seem all that significant. We have changes to the LOS on restructuring, and we have some changes to the LOS on alternative investments in real estate. I do remember the formulas for some of the real estate valuations being totally obscure and, in my opinion, not applicable to the real world. Maybe they're making some adjustments to those things. 2 final points about the level 2 exam changes, and these 2 are both big ones. First is that the Institute is making changes on the application of the code and standards for level 2. The reason this is a big deal is because throughout all instances that I can think of in the past when the Institute has updated their curriculum, they've never touched ethics. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was always that the Institute felt that their curriculum on ethics, ethical standards, the code and standards were perfect in every way, and they would never need to make adjustments to them. Almost never or have never seen changes to ethics from what I understand. And if I'm missing something, drop it in the comments down below. I'll pin that comment so that others can get the right information. Anyway, changes to the application of the code and standards would be a big deal, and I really want to see how they change how the code and standards need to be applied. Are they getting more strict? Most likely. Are they getting less strict? Probably not, but who knows? And finally, the point that I was hinting to when we talked about the level 1 exam derivatives is going to be an area that I cannot believe is not on this list. I cannot believe the Institute is not making any changes to those same derivative chapters, but for the level 2 curriculum. I talked about how I'm very happy to see those changes for the derivatives curriculum on the level 1 program, but if they made that change for the level 1 info, I think they certainly should have made it for the level 2 exam information on derivatives, because in my opinion, the level 2 derivatives book in general, and almost every LOS in it, is very poorly done, very difficult to follow, much more poorly done and much more difficult to follow than in level 1. I cannot fathom how we're getting changes or updates to the derivatives part of the curriculum for the level 1 exams, but nothing listed about derivatives for level 2. I'm going to have to look into this later on, or someone's going to have to explain to me how the Institute decided that they in fact needed to update the level 1 derivatives content, but not the level 2 derivatives content. I don't get it, man. That level 2 derivative stuff is so incredibly difficult. They need to change it somehow. About all of these changes in general, Chris Wiese, the guy we see on the Institute's YouTube channel, he's the director of exams or curriculum or something like that. He did make a few comments. They were very generic and boring. He basically said, students pursuing the CFA exam want rigorous academic information to train them for a strong career in finance. He mentioned some of the modules starting to become more bite-sized or digestible. I think that'll be helpful for people learning the material. And he called out the fact that they are making big changes to the derivatives curriculum on the level 1 program, noting that it's a notoriously difficult section. Well, guess what, Chris? Derivatives in level 2 is a lot harder than it is in level 1. It's practically harder than everything else that exists on planet Earth. So Chris, if you're watching this video, or maybe everyone down below share this video to him on Twitter or something, or email it to him, please, can the candidates of tomorrow get some changes to the level 2 derivatives curriculum as well? I'm sure it would be much appreciated. That's it for me. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Both of those things help out very much, and I appreciate them. As always, we'll see ya.